So as Newcastle fans, we might all want to know how Callum Wilson scores that goal. But more importantly, I think some of us now are starting to wonder where Callum Wilson might be next season and if Newcastle should look to keep him for a little bit longer. We're going to be discussing one of our main strikers, our number 9, our second highest Premier League goal scorer on this video, and the pros and the cons to keep him at St James's Park. If you're curious, Newcastle fans, and I think you are, do us a little favour and make sure you stick around for a lovely little dollop of black white banter. Welcome back to Black White Banter, you lovely ladies and gentlemen. And of course, we are all lovely ladies and gentlemen at the moment because Newcastle United just scored another 4 goals, another win, and another closer step to European football. And of course, if you have been living under a rock, Manchester United also got absolutely demolished at Crystal Palace to make that game at Old Trafford just that little bit more spicy. Sorry, I just had to get that in there because I absolutely hate them. But we're not here to talk about our European adventures today. We are not here to talk about Manchester United. I don't really ever want to talk about Man United unless it's just beating them. What we are talking about on this video, as I mentioned at the start, is a certain Mr. Callum Wilson. Cue the song. Know how you score that goal. Absolutely love that chant. Yes, it was Shearer's to start with, but you know, it had to be moved on to someone, and who better to move that chant onto than now the man who is only behind Alan Shearer. Yes, quite a big gap, and the less said about that goal scoring chart the better, because I read that as a little bit embarrassing for Newcastle to say we've been in the Premier League for so long that no one has hit the 50 mark other than Alan Shearer. But it's a feat nonetheless, and it's a one that Callum Wilson will proudly take to bed with him every night, that he is now our second highest Premier League scorer. And we are embarking, in my opinion, on one of the biggest summers we've ever had. There's going to be players out, there's hopefully going to be players in, there's going to be all sorts of change, and hopefully European football is in that conversation. But what is now becoming a bigger topic is who Newcastle United should get rid of, and Callum Wilson is starting to turn into a hot topic of that. And for me, look, let's talk about his performance on Saturday first. Burnley away, he came back into the team. I thought it was a masterstroke from Eddie Howe in terms of putting him and Alexander Isak on the pitch at the same time. Burnley could not handle the overload into the box. Callum Wilson very quickly justified his place in the team as he gobbled up an Alexander Isak save from their goalkeeper and tapped it in to set us on our way. And I thought all afternoon Callum Wilson was brilliant. His link-up play, his running, his aggression, he's, you know, and I'll share some graphics on the screen. Again, his first goal, as I mentioned, predatory instincts. We know he's got that in his locker. The hustle and the bustle on the touchline to lay the ball back to Jacob Murphy for Longstaff's goal. The way he chested the ball down from a long pass from Lewis Hall and set up Tino Livramento in the first half for a chance he should have taken. I thought he was absolutely instrumental. And I think most importantly, for a 32-year-old striker who has missed so much football, he looked sharp. There are not many 32-year-olds when they are on their game as a striker, which is a very unusual position as a player gets a little bit older, who look as sharp and on their game as that man. I thought he was full of running, he's still pacey, he still likes to play on the shoulder, and he's still absolutely full of beans when he's on the pitch. And I think as fans travelled home from Turf Moor on Saturday, maybe not so much me in having that conversation, because I'd had a fair few Benny Hots. I didn't do a match vlog for Saturday. I just couldn't. I enjoyed myself a little bit more than usual on Saturday, let's just say, putting it politely. But the main conversation was, do we keep him, do we not? And it's going to continue to ramble on as a debate, and I'm going to try and iron out both sides. Now, first and foremost, let's big up Callum Wilson, even a little bit more than just one performance against Burnley on Saturday. Let's look a little bit closer at his stats. No player in the Premier League has a better goals per minute ratio than Callum Wilson this season. And yes, anyone listening to that is going to say, well, he's barely played, and when he has played, he's scored. But that is the key for me in that statistic. When he has played, which is never easy, Newcastle fans, when you are coming in and out of the team and trying to get back up to match sharpness, as we saw on Saturday against Burnley, it can take some strikers 2, 3, 4 matches before they even get that goal scorer knack back. Callum Wilson has proved that, yes, he's missed too much football, which we'll allude to in this video in a little bit. But when he has played, he has banged them in. And he's in some very, very good company on that chart. Despite playing so little football for Newcastle this season, he is still very, very high in our XG, which for anyone who isn't into their stats is expected goals for Newcastle. Of course, Alexander Isak is leading that, but not by much. And Mr. Anthony Gordon, who's having the season of his life, scoring, assisting, winning penalties galore, look how far below that he is. Callum Wilson, still, when he is on the field, has some very, very impressive stats. And let's go back to last season. Last season, the season of all seasons, Newcastle clinching Champions League football, cup finals, playing some of the best stuff we've seen, barely losing a match. Callum Wilson's XG, expected goals, was only second to Erling Haaland, who, if anyone needs reminding, had the most freakish season where he pretty much scored 2,000 goals for Man City as they went on to win a quadruple in the end, which obviously carried into this season. But that's impressive in itself. And Callum Wilson last season saw a lot more playing time. These are all very, very, very impressive numbers. So why would there be any doubt? Why would there be any doubt? Well, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out why there is doubt about keeping Callum Wilson any longer at the football club. He's one of our highest ever scorers. His stats are really good. He knows where the goal is. But there's a slight problem. And I'll stick that on the screen right now. And this isn't even including the full length of his pectoral injury. This is just as his pectoral injury had happened. This is his career and how many injuries he's had across that career. At his time at Newcastle, he has only played 48% of matches, which is just such a shame. Such a crying shame, because can you imagine where Callum Wilson would be on that Premier League scoring chart if he played 70% of matches, 80% of matches? Every player gets injuries from time to time, but the numbers would be absolutely crazy. So that's what's causing this conversation. Do we get rid? Do we keep? From speaking to fans myself, a lot of Newcastle fans seem torn on this. Really, really torn. I think every Newcastle fan has a soft spot for Callum Wilson. He's been there for us through darker days, and he's helped us and scored some really, really good goals. Fan favourite, great chant in the stands. But we are, in a lot of fans' eyes, moving on to bigger and better things. And a player who is not on the pitch enough is a problem. Where do I stand on this one? I see both sides. And what I mean by that is, first and foremost, this next 3 matches, let's see where Callum Wilson finishes the season. Let's see whether he starts banging goals in against Brighton, against Man United, against Brentford on the last game. Even in the Australian post-season tour, I would imagine Callum Wilson might be a man who's not really going to get an England call-up. You know, there might be some calls for him to come into the squad last minute. I do not see that happening, unless he maybe scored 7 goals in the next 3 matches. Absolutely outstanding, eye-catching performances. He's not getting in ahead of Ollie Watkins, who's had a fantastic year for Aston Villa. Harry Kane. Again, I'm not opening up that chat on this, but let's see how he finishes the season. Let's see. And my biggest point on this is Newcastle are trying to build a squad capable of really big things. I'm going to assume on this video, my God, I'm going to apologise if I get it wrong, that Newcastle United might be playing European football next season. Unless we have a really bad dip in form in the next 3 matches, we will be playing some form of European football. And for that, as we found out this year, let's assume that we don't have 200 million injuries. Fucking hell. We need good players. We need good players to come in, and we need rotation. Alexander Isak and Callum Wilson have proved in the 2 years they have played together, in my opinion, even as it stands right now in the last 2 matches, that they complement each other. They are getting the best out of each other, both on and off the pitch. And what do I mean by that? Well, Alexander Isak knows that when Callum Wilson comes in, he will score goals. Callum Wilson knows, watching from the sideline all this time he's been injured, that Alexander Isak certainly knows where the goal is, and Callum Wilson is on social media and will know that people are talking about him going to Arsenal for X amount of money, that he is one of the best strikers in the Premier League, and that just works as motivation for Callum Wilson, because Callum Wilson has got a massive head. Let's face it, we all know it. He's handsome as hell. He has swagger about him. He sees himself as the best striker at this club, and I'm sure he would say that if he was asked that in an interview. And those two have not only proved against Burnley, in other matches, Sheffield United, when Alexander Isak knocked it down for Wilson, he almost scored. Them two can link up together because they are so different. Alexander Isak will never have the same predatory instincts as Callum Wilson. I don't care what anyone says. Callum Wilson, on his day, is one of the best goal scorers in the Premier League. And I will make that statement. And if anyone wants to jump in the comments and correct me on that, feel free. Feel free. He is still, on his day, and I saw it on Saturday against Burnley, one of the most dangerous, stressful for defenders, strikers in the Premier League, and he knows where the goal is. He doesn't need 2 chances to score. He doesn't, and the stats prove that. He's so good in front of goal. Those two complement each other, and so many Newcastle fans are going to say that we should sell, which I'll touch on in a second, and bring in a young striker to learn from Alexander Isak. To me, that's not building a squad. Yes, we want a young striker to come into the football club who's happy to be on the bench, but we also need another striker on top of that if we are going to compete in the Premier League, in the Europa League or Europa Conference, in the Carabao Cup and in the FA Cup. Bringing a young striker in as your only main backup striker has been proven by other football clubs to not really work that well. Don't believe me? Let's talk about some. Aston Villa, Ollie Watkins, I've already mentioned him on this video, absolutely class striker. Not only is Ollie Watkins a very good goal scorer, he's also a great link-up striker. Look at his assists this season, absolutely mad stats. Fully deserves to be on the plane for the Euros in the summer. Fully deserved, and that's why Aston Villa have had such a good season, because of players like him. But Aston Villa paid £18 million for a striker called Duran from Chicago Fire in America. He's come in, massive prospect, great pace, great excitement about him coming into the football club. But as that understudy forward, what's he contributed to Villa this season? Not very much. He had a little bright spell at the start of the season, but apart from that, his goals have been very minimal. Brighton, De Zerbi. Yes, a lot of people might argue that Brighton have fell off a cliff a little bit this season, which could be my famous last words before we play them at the weekend. They have Ferguson as one of their main strikers, obviously with Welbeck, who's the old guard now in their team. Great prospect, absolutely brilliant. If any Newcastle fan needs reminding, he scored a hat-trick against us in August, which that was one of the worst away days I've been on this season. Very good footballer, but look at his goals return. Look at his goals return and how many matches he's played. 20, almost 30 matches in the Premier League played this season, and he has not even hit double figures because he is still learning his trade. There are not many strikers in world football who come into a league like the Premier League and hit the ground running straight away. Let's look at one of the best teams in the country. Arsenal, absolutely flying this season. And Nketiah, I think he's been linked with Newcastle in the last year or so. Great prospect. Some Arsenal fans like him. A lot of them think he's not good enough. 24 years old. He's barely done anything for them. And yes, a lot of his appearances for Arsenal might have been off the bench, but his goal record is not very good because he's still learning his trade. And when you are only playing bit part in the Premier League as a youngster, it's very difficult. So what is my point here? Newcastle United, yes, we need to be looking at a young understudy. Someone who's upcoming, 19, 20, 21 years old. Maybe scour the leagues around Europe. But for that to be our only option to Alexander Isak, who, can I just say, has had injury problems at his time at Newcastle, could be leaving this team so short. Callum Wilson is a proven Premier League goal scorer who, in my opinion, when he plays, still looks very sharp. Do I want to see Callum Wilson at the club next season if he's only going to be fit for 40% of that season? Of course not. But let's just keep the jury out a little bit for me between now and the end of the season. Let's see how he finishes. And honestly, we could really be cursing that the grass isn't greener if we decide to cash in on him, bring a young player in as the only backup to Alexander Isak. Because let's face it, Newcastle fans, we are not going to have the riches to sign a Solanke. Do I think Eddie Howe's main priority in the summer is striker? 100 million% no. I think it'll be in the conversation, but with where we might have to spend our money, right midfield, please, goalkeeper, maybe. Where else we look at defensive midfield? Yes, I think that's an area Newcastle could definitely look at. Centre-back because of Butman and Lascelles' injuries. Yes, that's definitely an area we need to look at. There's four positions I've mentioned. We are not going to get a striker for 40, 50, 60 million to come in to play. Let's face it, in this system that we play, maybe understudy to Isak and starting off the bench, we have an adaptable strike force at the moment with Wilson and Isak when they both fit that can play together, as we saw at Burnley, but all can also be chomping at each other to come in and really make a difference, which with everyone starts. And Isak can even play on the left when Wilson plays down the middle. The strikers, like Callum Wilson, are starting to become a dying breed, and even more so a one that knows the Premier League inside and out. I think we need to reassess things in the summer. I'll trust our medical team a little bit in that. Now, in terms of the transfer fee, some Newcastle fans are saying if we can get 20 million, sell him. If we can get 25 million, I just think we are in cloud cuckoo land. If we think, just check my microphone's still on. If we think that we are commanding that much money for a 32-year-old, I don't think so. If 25 million was put in front of Newcastle in one payment, yes, let's talk about that. Let's see where that ramps us up. But make no mistake about it, Callum Wilson, on his day, is still sharp, very technically gifted, still a hell of a goal scorer, and can still offer this Newcastle team something next season and make us a stronger team as we try and challenge on all fronts. I'm torn, like Callum Wilson's pectoral has been for the last 6 months, but my gut is telling me to keep the player at the football club unless something goes catastrophically wrong between now and the end of the season. And I really hope that he puts himself in that conversation by finishing the season as strong as what we saw against Burnley on Saturday. Get down, Newcastle fans. Get in the comments. Let me know what you think of this, because the people I've spoken to, it's really torn people. Some people are more head over heart because they've got such a soft spot for Callum Wilson, and some are just get rid. He's not on the field enough. I see both sides, and that's why this is a really interesting topic. I hope you've liked this video. I hope you've liked the effort I've been putting into live streams and videos out St James's Park a little bit more. 20 to 30 hours a week is going on black and white banter for me at the moment on top of a full-time job. That's not me playing the get the violin card out. That's just me making you aware that I absolutely love this and I'm desperate for a black and white banter to keep growing. So thank you very much for your support. Whack that like and subscribe because that goes a long way, and I'll see you on the next one. I want to know. I can score there. I'll miss that chant even if he does go.